Close your eyes and take a few breaths. Let go of your 21st century problems for a while and let me bring you to a historical period that is widely known and widely misunderstood. Baroque is a term you might come across often while traveling European countries or learning about history regarding arts. But what many people don't know is what actually drove the movement and made it so remarkable that its ideologies impact even modern life. Let's start with the historical context, because no period can be perceived isolated. The Baroque era in literature and arts is officially marked to have lasted from 1600 to 1720, but we have to look at what happened before to understand the movement. On 31st October 1517, the German monk Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church by publishing a religious writing known as the 95 Theses. The 95 Theses are a list of arguments written by Martin Luther that criticized the Catholic Church's sale of indulgences and called for reform in church practices and theology. This event was a catalyst for the creation of the Protestant Church, which later split up again in different smaller categories, like the Evangelical Church, the Presbyterian Church, and so on, but that's beside the point. For our 21st century brains, it's just logical that there are many religions coexisting, but at that time the emergence of a new church split Europe in two. Sweden became one of the first countries where Protestant ideals not only took root, but fully replaced the Catholic Church. Under the rule of King Gustav Vasa, in 1527 marked a turning point. The king seized church lands, abolished papal authority, and established Lutheranism as the state religion. This bold political and religious move made Sweden a leading example of a nation where the Catholic Church was officially dismantled and Protestantism became deeply embedded in both governance and society. During that period, Germany wasn't a unified country but consisted of city-states, like Italy, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Belgium, and many of those city-states adopted Lutheranism. Now you can imagine how the Catholic Church was shocked and afraid to lose more power and territory. What would you do if you were to save the image and keep up the appearance of power? In response to the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church launched a major effort to regain influence and reaffirm its authority, which historians call the Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation. Which brings us right to our first key point, art and architecture. Imagine you are an illiterate farmer of the 16th century. What would impress you? That's probably the prompt the church members brainstormed back then, too, and the result was the church commissioned spectacular art and architecture to inspire awe and devotion. The Baroque style, with its dramatic, emotional, and elaborate designs, was used to visually communicate the glory and power of the church. The Vatican is late Renaissance, and the exterior is early Baroque, for example. These buildings were spiritual theaters, meant to make people feel the presence of God through light, grandeur, and emotion. The Catholic Church used Baroque architecture and art as a propaganda tool, showing that while Protestants stripped churches bare, Rome filled them with awe. Of course, there were other reformations too, but this lection is not about the Catholic Church. Now, which artists come to mind while thinking about Baroque painting? If you said Caravaggio, congrats, but what makes his art special? Baroque artists were masters of drama, movement, and emotional intensity. They worked closely with the Catholic Church during the Counter-Reformation to create art that inspired awe and devotion. Artists like Caravaggio used stark contrasts of light and shadow, chiaroscuro, to make religious scenes feel immediate and real. Gian Lorenzo Bernini sculpted dynamic, almost theatrical figures that seemed to breathe and move, like his famous Ecstasy of St. Teresa. Painters like Peter Paul Rubens filled canvases with energy, sensuality, and vibrant color, while Artemisia Gentileschi brought a powerful female voice to biblical stories. Baroque art wasn't subtle. It was bold, emotional, the eye and the soul. The word chiaroscuro is Italian and literally means light-dark. It creates depth and aims to lead the eye exactly to the main subject. The artist wants to communicate. Besides the elaborate techniques, there are other factors that make the paintings feel realistic and that is the choice of models. Caravaggio, for example, only used people from the street to be his models, prostitutes and beggars. He wanted his paintings to transmit the notion of religious depictions, but not in the idealized manners in which it was done before. He depicted raw joy and suffering in normal bodies and faces. They also explored Greek and Roman mythology, which allowed them to depict nudity and desire in a culturally accepted way. This blend of sacred themes with earthly realism and emotional intensity made their art powerful and sometimes controversial. During the Baroque era, art gradually began to move beyond strictly religious themes, especially as the period progressed into the late Baroque and Rococo. While the Catholic Church remained a major patron, many artists started creating works for wealthy private clients, including secular subjects like mythology, portraits, and everyday life. This shift allowed artists more creative freedom and helped Baroque art evolve into a broader expression of culture, emotion, and power beyond just church commissions. An artist I want to specifically mention is Artemisia Gentileschi. Artemisia Gentileschi, 1593–1656, was a pioneering Baroque painter and one of the first prominent female artists in Western art history. In 1612, she took the extraordinary step of pursuing a public legal case to defend her reputation and rights after being assaulted by an older friend of her father's, an uncommon action for women of her time. Her successful lawsuit was a significant moment, demonstrating her courage and determination, and it influenced her career as an artist known for powerful dramatic works. Interesting that the first documented lawsuit for assault was in the Baroque era, right? Now, to sculptures, you can recognize them by the expressive faces and the posture that insinuates a movement and being in the midst of an action. So basically, movement, floating clothes and hair, and a strong and dramatic expression are indicators that a statue is in the Baroque style. Let's move on to the literature of the Baroque. Baroque literature is defined by its intense emotion, complexity, and contrasts, reflecting the turbulent social, political, and religious climate of the 17th century. Key themes include mortality and the fleeting nature of life, memento mori, the conflict between earthly desires and spiritual salvation, the tension between order and chaos, and the use of elaborate metaphors and allegories. These themes were relevant because Europe was experiencing wars, religious upheaval like the 30 Years' War and Counter-Reformation, and uncertainty, so literature explored human fragility, the search for meaning, and the struggle between worldly vanity and deeper faith. In the working class, themes like hunger and death were prominent, and beneath the upper classes, the ephemeral beauty of life was a key theme. The concept of fleeting youth and beauty is captured under the Latin term vanitas. You might also know Latin expressions like carpe diem and memento mori that surface even in pop cultural contexts nowadays. Well, they originate from the period of the Baroque and are translated to seize the day and remember your mortality. It seems like kitsch today, but they capture the zeitgeist perfectly. To cover this subject more or less, we ought to mention Le Roi Soleil. In France, the Baroque era became a powerful political tool, especially under King Louis XIV, who used art, architecture, and performance to reinforce his image as an absolute monarch. The style was more restrained and classical than its Italian counterpart, emphasizing order, grandeur, and control. The most iconic example is the Palace of Versailles, which not only symbolized royal power, but also physically centralized the nobility under the king's watch. Through institutions like the Royal Academy, Louis XIV regulated artistic expression to serve the state, using Baroque aesthetics to promote unity, hierarchy, and the divine right of kings. In this way, French Baroque culture helped consolidate royal authority and shape national identity during a period of strong centralization. So no wonder 74 years after Louis' death, under the reign of Louis XV, his grandson took place the French Revolution. By then the Baroque was already obsolete and replaced with the ideology of the Enlightenment. If you find this type of content interesting and relaxing, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time when you want to learn some art history